what is happening now with this?
So I'm thinking, for me, it started with the whole sustainability, because being somebody that is, reached the 50 bracket, suddenly you have a lot more youngsters in the building, right? Who are also looking for companies effectively working with sustainability. And naturally, today, every company has sustainability as one of their corporate goals. So as a CDO then, I'm thinking, so how do I, on the C-level, attack that value, that corporate value? What is my part in that? And again, I think today, every company is collecting a shitload of data, excuse my words, but yes, because you want to train your AI. And for software development, especially, you are building all these features. So you need to be collecting data for every feature to train your AI. Do you really need all that data? That is the question. So my take on it was, what can we do as a CDO function? What can my team start to look into to add value to sustainability, both from an environmental perspective, but also from a cost perspective, because both can't be, it's not good for your organization. So that is where I actually started to look at this. And I think it was wonderful, because then you have a very tight connection to data quality. Coming from Zenseact, building software for self-driving cars for Volvo, you are collecting data, your cars are driving around and you're collecting data. So the question is, for a car that has been just standing still, parked or at a red light, we're still collecting the data. So what quality function can I have effectively that deletes that data and I don't need to push everything in? So before I actually get my data from the cars and move it into my data storage, I need to have a really good set of data quality tools that effectively just delete and purge data that is not needed.
So to unpack this topic, on the one hand side, the overarching driver is sustainability. Mm-hmm. And from sustainability, we can go into from a CDO perspective, what the hardcore question for a CDO or for the IT department to think about, how can we be as CO2 friendly, so to speak, as possible?
Yes.
With the way we are doing our data processing?
Yes.
So how can we minimize the impact we are doing in terms of storing a lot of data,
yes,
running super expensive large language models in an unnecessary way, etc.
Exactly.
So this is one part of this. And of course, there's the cost related to that.
Yes.
And then there is another angle on this, and that is coming into this from sustainability has led EU to push new regulations and different frameworks on how we need to report on this. And we come into the ESG topic, environmental, social, and governmental reporting, where basically now frameworks are coming up, how we need to collect very different data than we are used to in order to be transparent about our CO2 footprint, as an example.
Yes.
And of course, this now also hits the CDO agenda, because now it's not only about how the CDO can be more
insight-driven,
CO2 friendly, but actually it's a massive data collection and data processing project in the making here.
Yes.
Where from a cost perspective, to do all this data collection in a manual way or in a more traditional way might be very, very costly in terms of headcount versus driving very, very professional data governance and very, very professional data processing.
Yes.
So for me, the cost is in relation to, and the topic is in relation to how can I as a CDO work with the reduction of the CO2 footprint in our operation? Mm-hmm. And how can I, in such a cost-effective way, make sure we can do the governance reporting and data and another type of data collection we might not have done in the past, that basically we need to for a license to operate. So in some cases now, you're going to get fines and you're going to have a revoked license to operate if you have not done your compliant ESG reporting. So that's this is like two angles to this topic. Like we can go down into, to what you're highlighting on being smart of the life cycle of data, but we can also go down in understanding the data processing side of ESG reporting, which is massive. So that's an interesting topic, and that we can kind of start with. But before we go much deeper into these topics, I just want to introduce you, Vanessa Eriksson, as the podcast guest here at AI After Work, and super happy to have you here. And you've been part of the community for a long time. You are a DARE Awards winner. We need to talk about that. So also very recognized on a broader scale in the Nordic data and AI community. You are one of the first appointed CDOs, Chief Data Officers, in the Nordic region, and you've been working with these topics both in PwC, and then now you've had the role of CDO in Sensiact, as you highlighted for the last 3 or 4 years, I guess.
Yeah, 3.
Yeah, so welcome, Vanessa, and
thank you.
How would you sort of very shortly describe yourself, and then we can get back onto the real topics here.
Yeah, I think you've covered most of it. I think I'm very passionate about working with data. Like you, I've been working with data forever. And I think that it's almost a bit surreal to think that I'm one of the first to be appointed with the role. That was when I was working with Gartner. I was on the Gartner advisory board for several years. And I worked with Deborah Logan in creating that, the best practices and what should the role do. So a solid background in what should a CDO really be doing.
Very interesting. I know Deborah. She coined information as a second language, or something like this, as a Gartner term.
Yeah. But she's retired now.
But this must be back in 2000. I don't know, 15?
Yes.
16?
Yes, 16.
Yeah, fantastic. So tell us, like, what was the starting point being, when you started thinking about the CDO at this point in time? What's the sort of highlights of, what you came up with or thought about or did at that point in time?
So I think it's a lot. If you think way back when, because you had this defensive and offensive tracks, and understanding then, so what should the CDO really be doing? I think at that time it was also quite heavy on the whole data governance. Companies could not understand, what is it when you say ownership of data? What do you really mean? But I also, stressing on the innovation part of it, continue with the POCs. Keep looking for the solutions that will actually make a difference to your business. I think that is still very relevant even today, because the POC part and looking for, what more can we be doing with our data? That has to be a missionary that just keeps churning out different solutions. But I think today the whole everybody wants to be working with AI. And that's where my next big fast train, I see this big fast train coming, because 10 years ago it was data governance. I think the next fast train is the whole AI governance, and how are we actually working with our AI. And I think to connect it, I think data leaders and you would also see the connection with data governance as well. AI governance and data governance, they go really hand in hand. What do you think?
No, I fully agree, and we can all agree upon that has been working in this field, that without proper data governance or proper training data into our algorithms, we will struggle, right? And so they are intensely connected. Mm-hmm. And but if we would very, very quickly go down the small rabbit hole of separating data governance and AI governance, how would we together in a simple way, what is what here?
Okay, so data governance for me is who owns it? What are the processes? What are the rules that we have to work with our data? And then when we see, looking at the quality of the data, what is not working? Is it the IT systems? Is it the processes? What needs to be changed? Because then if we have an owner for our data, it's so much easier to just take the issues back to the owner and say, this is it. This is not working. This is what we have identified. What do you want to do about it? Because coming again from an IT function or whatever, it doesn't work that way. You need to have who owns the data to address the issues. That for me is data governance.
That is so in a way, that is sort of a fundament that doesn't go away.
No.
But now we need to have that building block. And now when we go into AI, our governance needs to expand in some other areas in order to understand that the scope, this is still equally important. And without the foundation here, you will really struggle with the AI governance. And I would argue you can't even do AI governance if you can't even have the starting point, who owns the data and who owns the algorithm.
Absolutely.
But what are the next level now when we put the AI wrapper on top of that? How would you then add to that story?
I think, earlier this year, I was a judge for the whole AI, responsible AI for the automotive industry. And that's where I actually was, it was such an eye-opener to understand, so how do you actually work with it? Because when you look at responsible AI, for example, it's not just, pieces of data, who owns this. You're looking at the entire process and saying, so for example, we are out there, our cars are out there collecting data, right? For each feature. That process starts from, so who's assigning the cars? Where are the cars? And this is just an example I'm sharing with you. But it starts right from the beginning where, who's assigning my cars? Where are our cars going? Do we have it all covered? Or am I only looking at Sweden? Do I have cars everywhere so that there are no biases in that process? So you're looking at a complete process to say, am I really doing responsible AI? So am I going so fast that I'm missing any potential biases? Is it transparent enough so whoever says that this is mine can actually explain, yes, why did the car stop? Or why did the car, if there was no reason, why did it move to the left or the right and not stay in the lane? That is where, you will also, you get paid back because your customer will trust your product even better when you know that you can explain why my AI behaved in a certain way.
So what you're doing now is a little bit taking the AI governance heading and breaking it down into 3, 4, 5 major areas. So how we deal with bias is one core area of AI governance. Transparency and explainability is another one. What other ones?
And the accountability.
Accountability, exactly. And what do you mean with accountability?
So I think it ties to, if I'm looking at my data model, who owns this? Because somebody, when shit happens, I need to know, who can I go to and say, hey, this was yours? Either a feature team, a product team, because something needs to change, right? So let's say I've identified a bias. I need to know, so where is this? Which team do I actually take this back to say, by the way, this needs to be changed.
Yeah,
this is not okay. So that's what I come with. So who's accountable here? Because you can't go to a company and say, yes, you can go to a company, but then the company needs to have help also in drilling down. So who owns this?
But if I'm going to test if I understand you right now, because if I link that back to a CDO function or a CDO role and making this operational, going from PowerPoint and high-level ideas to something that really works in a real company in real time, so to speak. Like the way I understand this, what you're saying now is that on the one hand side, you need to highlight let's start simple. In one way, you need to have ideas on policies and principles. What is good behaviors? What is good practice? And what do we do and not do? So this is sort of, now we are on sort of policy level.
Yes.
Then you need to ask the question who or who owns this. So now we need to get into a like an organizational topology where we basically, to make this real, start sorting on algorithm level or data level.
Yes.
You know, who has the accountability around this topic, or who do we go to fix this? And then ultimately you need to take it into operations. You need to take the topics of data governance and AI governance not only as a policing activity at the end, but you need to put it all the way down into your core design processes or DevOps processes.
Yes.
So flipping it so you do AI governance by design. So flipping it so you do data governance by design.
Yes.
And now we have talked about that whole piece of the puzzle. How do we do that in a way as a company, as an enterprise? Because the problem is, if each different function has their own ideas on this, holistically you're not going to have interoperability, and holistically you're not going to be tracing, you know, the different algorithms that works with each other, or the different data that works with each other. So someone needs to drive a common platform idea around this, even if we're working in different engineering teams and different autonomous teams. Is that sort of...
That is perfect. And I think that the CDO function then is the perfect place to run that, right? Because otherwise, I mean, so at Sensact, I talk about my experience from Sensact.
Yeah.
It's a startup, right? So we're building the software, and it's the product, and the product teams are working with the features. So then as a CDO function, how do you add value to the company and to the products? So building that platform, creating those processes, giving them the insights, and helping them with that, both the data governance model, but also because the owners and the accountability will come from within the product area.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we will be able to circle it back all the way to ESG governance on going down these rabbit holes now. So let's stay here right now, because there is one thing about understanding how this works in a tech startup. So in a sense here we have the environment where everybody in Sensact in some ways are working on a digital platform.
Yes.
Everybody's working on algorithms. Everybody's working on creating autonomous software, autonomous vehicle software that they are now embedding and selling into Volvo as an OEM, as an example. So the interesting point here is that all the different teams are sort of self-sustainable when it comes to data and engineers and all that kind of stuff. But the problem is, how can they interact with each other, and how can we have standards on a very, very granular level so they holistically work together, and effectively you can do this across the whole system.
Yeah.
And I think this then highlights the difference between where we need to have platform. Like let's say the CDO function has a central platform understanding, and how we then service this platform to different engineering teams or different domain teams and stuff like that. And I think this is one of the mistakes or misconceptions of what's the difference between the central teams and the real engineering teams doing work. That even if you have very autonomous domain teams who can do their own, someone is working on this algorithm, someone is working on the UX and stuff like that. If they don't have interoperability, if they don't have governance translated into how they work with engineering or with machine learning, this whole holistic system will not work as one. It will work as a fragmented, disparate silos.
Yes, absolutely. So I think it is in their interest to work with the CDO function. And get the help. Yeah,
because in some ways now, this distinction between how the CDO acts as a provider and enabler whilst the actual engineering is done
Yes.
in the one domain team. I think this can be sometimes misunderstood, especially if I go to more traditional companies. Then we are understanding ourselves as a business unit out here and a central IT function as an example.
Yeah.
But here we are actually, the relationship is not so much the same. It's someone has the platform responsibility, but we're not going to build it for you. The engineering team is going to build it within their domain, but someone needs to take care of the holistic governance, I think sometimes the governance word is misunderstood, because we need to translate governance into hardcore standards in practices and patterns and protocols in order to do the right stuff. So for me, that misconception that we have a central platform team, then you're building the central engineering pieces. No, we are here to provide a platform for many other domain teams to be able to work together effectively. Do you follow that kind of misconception of central versus domain, or platform versus domain, how it should be versus sometimes?
Yes, and I think also, I absolutely agree with you, Henrik. I think also for a small company, like a startup like Zensact, it is quite important that you have a central function helping you, because all of these engineers are there for another specific function, right? To build the product, to build the software.
Exactly.
Yes. And that's why, so you have a CDO function, you have a CDO role, you have the organization there, a small organization, albeit, to help them to understand, but you have to have this synchronization between the CDO and the product teams, because they are the experts in their areas, in their domains. So you need them nevertheless to work together with the CDO function, because otherwise, for us, coming there as a CDO function, there's no way me or my team would know, so what features and what are we doing in here? That's the closeness and the cooperation we need to have with them to get the most out of the work that we're doing.
But would you then, if I try to put the word on the identity of the CDO function, would you understand the CDO function as an enabling function for the domain to do their work, but ultimately do it in a platform way so it flows? Or would you put another word, or do you see what I mean with as an enabling, to see themselves as an enabling function?
Yes, I think I would agree with that.
Yeah, because having said that, if I back the tape up to 2015-16, at that point in time, even Gartner, we were talking about operation centers of excellence. And we were doing different types of models of how to organize everything centralized or everything decentralized, or in a hub and spoke model.
Yeah.
And if I go back to where we were in 2016-17, there was this idea that we're going to build a central AI team, we're going to build a central data team, and basically we were going to do the stuff for them, and then we're going to have only consumers and no engineers, so to speak, out in the domains. And this storytelling I'm doing now has very little to do with a tech company like Zensact, but more about how this was understood in the
I remember those days. Yes.
The traditional enterprise world, right? The problem here was that when we put the story, that's not an enablement team anymore. That is actually a central team taking over the job to build the algorithm. And the problem with that model in the end turned out, in my opinion, that the central team was too far away from the domain problem.
Yeah.
And then we had these ping-ponging games, whispering games going on, and we started building up data science team or data engineering teams, but they were not close enough to the problem. I mean, and if you flip that to how it really works in a tech startup like Zensact, that's vastly different.
Yes. So I think the product teams are the ones responsible for building, their algorithms and whatever they need. The software, their product. We are working together with them to understand, so what is it? So one of the things that we did was, from the start, we were looking at Jira to say, so where are we? How good are we? How are we measuring our productivity? And that's where we invested in the talent platform.
Yeah.
To get the data from the GitHub and other sources, to put that together to say, okay, so what are the different features? Where are we? For example, because I think that would be a little overwhelming for the product teams to go out and start doing that, right? Because over here also, it's not just about the product team. As a CDO function, you have the people insights as well, the people data. Where are people? What are the resources? What are the skills that we need to be developing more? You have the finance data as well. So a CDO function is not just about the product data. As an example, you have a lot of other data that the teams then, the data scientists or whoever you have in your team, putting that data together to give the company back insights.
Yeah, because if you think about it, each product team has a subset understanding of the talent they need and the cost of running maybe their small part.
Yeah.
But they are not charged with having the enterprise understanding for this. So when you're trying to take a more strategic look at how do we invest and prioritize what talent to hire and stuff like that, and what sourcing do we need, what tool sets do we need, you get a very fragmented picture of that if you only ask and you're trying to collect that manually or through with each product team. And what you're saying now is that to holistically steer the resource allocation and the cost and understanding this, someone needs to take a step back and see, okay, when we put all the pieces of the puzzle together,
what does it look like?
From 10 product teams, what does it actually look like? A good example can be, I will hoard my data.
Yes.
It's just a couple of terabytes that I'm doing.
Yeah.
But when you put that next to each other, all of a sudden, for a startup, that could be the burn rate that goes through the window.
And I think sometimes that information is not available, or it does not. Nobody perceives it, right? If you are not on that level in the organization, you are, sorry to say, if you are a developer and you're just, you've got your code to create and continue to develop it, that insight of, by the way, I'm holding a lot of data and this is costing the company, it's not automatically that you get that.
No, and it's quite logical because someone in their domain has one KPI and one goal to build as good product or algorithm as possible, and they have sharp deadlines to get that done. That's what they're measured at. At the same point in time, someone needs to look at the holistic picture. What is this platform actually consuming? How is this platform actually evolving? Is it evolving now? I can realize that we have two different teams and they go out and buy different products to do the same thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, the first understanding to really understand the CDO function, you need to stop thinking central versus local, and you need to think platform versus domain. Because just by doing that, so that when you have a central team, you say, we're going to put the actual use case in the central data warehouse in the central. So this is still looking at things, but just moving them one way. When we take platform versus domain, we are shifting the way we're understanding the responsibilities and looking at it from a different lens. Do you see what I mean here?
Absolutely.
Do you agree with that simple analogy?
Yes. And even though it was a startup, that's pretty much the way we worked, right? Because you've got the different domains.
Yeah.
You collect all that data and say, okay, so what do we look like? How good are we? Yeah. What do we still need to be focusing on? What needs to be taken out? Because it's not obvious that to everybody else that maybe we shouldn't be doing all these that we want to be doing.
Yeah, but I'm going to test another idea then. I think there's a vast difference between understanding this quite naturally in a tech startup as Sensiac, that essentially is a platform company with a lot of different domains and microservices in relation to a fully autonomous system platform. So from birth, this company kind of understands that separation of concerns between platform and domain.
Yeah.
When I go to the most traditional enterprises, they have not sliced the mandates and relationship like horizontally, like domain versus platform. They rather looked at this is end-to-end the full stack in a local system versus this is end-to-end the whole use case, the whole shaboom in a central system. And we are then looking at, how should I put it, silos that are sort of thinner in one local business unit versus silos that are bigger, which is maybe serving a larger community that belongs in a central function. So we are not slicing the relationship platform versus domain. We are used to slicing responsibilities, local system versus central systems, end to end, with the use case, with the project.
Yeah.
So, and I think the CDO function either way needs to work platform versus domain, but the journey to do that when you have central versus local as the starting point is way different.
Yes. And I think that's the role of the CDO, to be talking to the peers, giving them that business case, teasing them with what are the potential, what are the opportunities, missed opportunities, and getting the buy-in from all of them, and perhaps the board as well.
Yeah. So how would you picture your sort of work, or how would you summarize, to make it more concrete, the CDO role work that you did now most recently in Sensiact? So how would you describe what that job was on a daily basis, or who did you talk to? What was sort of on your agenda as a CDO?
So it was not the chief data here at Sensiact, it was chief digital. And my responsibilities were data, IT, and cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And data, like I just said, was looking at data from the entire organization. Mm-hmm. So it was the people data, the finance data, product data, everything that we could get. And then since we were sharing the data together with Volvo, working together with them as well to understand, so what does the roadmap look like? And especially since we also were established, they still are. I don't work with them anymore. In China, the laws in China, you can't move any data out. So that brought a complete new dimension with federated learning. Working together with AI Sweden, I was the chairman of the project. So it was Volvo Cars, Sensiact, and AI Sweden in understanding, so what can we do? And there it's still very much, theory. But how could we use federated learning coming up rather soon in moving that data? From a cybersecurity perspective, it was both cybersecurity, protecting our product, the software, but also in the company, because that's a complete new ballgame as well, right? Yeah. If you're a software company, understanding that, by the way, you can't download your code and take it home.
Exactly.
Something as small as that, getting your employees to understand in a fun way, in a way that is not intrusive, or in the most polite way. How could you help your employees understand? That was also quite a challenge. And then from an IT perspective, it is just having the most up-to-date tools in the building, keeping the offices running, and also working from home conditions. So I think that I absolutely loved my job at...
But there's a big variety when you put the digital officer and you have the core dimension of security,
yes,
normal IT, and then
data. Yes, but you have to have good people, right? People that you trust working in your management team.
How did you organize your management team?
So I had an engineering manager. I had a head of data, head of cybersecurity. I had a CIO role reporting to me.
Yeah, so the CIO role in this setup is actually part of reporting into the CDO.
Yes, yeah.
And the CIO role is then what? can we refer to as more traditional? I mean, we need a lot of office management. We need our teams. We need our file storage for all this.
Yeah.
Access management for our employees, etc., etc.
Yes. So the CIO reported to me
and had that part. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting one.
Yeah. And it was fun. I think it worked because it was a small company. So, but I'm guessing in a normal enterprise company organization, I think that would be a little overwhelming to have cybersecurity and data and IT.
But what based on your learnings all the way back from Gartner and working with Deborah to PwC and then now into Sensiact, what is the understanding for how to organize or where to place the CDO function, in your opinion? If I need to frame that, I would give one answer if we are in a startup. I would potentially give another answer in a hyperscaler like Klarna or Spotify, and I would give a third answer most likely if I look at a more traditional enterprise. So let's start with the traditional enterprise. So let's take a Swedish bank or a Swedish manufacturing company that has probably then a CIO from many years back. And they haven't really maybe had a digital officer or a data officer, and now they're thinking about it. So how would you think about this for the traditional enterprise, so to speak?
I think this role absolutely has to be on the C-level. So it's not just giving them the CDO, title and then pushing them down to report to the CIO or CTO or something like that. And that is the journey, that is the fight that I took years ago while I was at Telia.
Yeah.
Because I got questioned, what's in a role? And I said, okay, I'm going to take your CFO title off and I just call you head of finance. What's in a role, right? What's in a role? Because if you give somebody the responsibility of a chief data officer, then also try to understand, so what is the mandate you're giving this role? What are the expectations as well? Because I think today a lot of companies hire a CDO and they expect everything to be done, everything to be fixed. I think where they lose their patience is because you will accept that you need to have your foundation in place. I think AI is the new, like orange. What is it? Orange is the new black. AI is the new. Yes, it's the new sexy thing to do. And of course, everybody wants to be in that space. But understanding that if you do not have your proper data quality, data governance in place, there's just going to be a lot of capital S. HIT on top there, right?
But one of the objections that I've heard and seen is like, okay, so how many C-suites should we have? If we have a chief data officer, should we now have a chief AI officer next to it, and how should we relate now? So for me, the confusion starts, and I think that's why we have a lot of challenges. Like if we look at the US, for instance, the average length of the tenure of a CDO is fairly short. And I think it has a lot to do with misaligned expectation understandings of the mandates and the roles. And we put the role in place, but as you said, we didn't give the arena for that role to work. And I think that whole thinking about what is the real arena, how does it fit with the other roles, I think this is confusing for many.
Absolutely. And I think that when they are hiring a CDO, because I usually say, by the way, I'm not an engineer. You know that, right? And I'm not a data scientist. I'm not coming there because, it's you're asking for a leader or you're asking for somebody to, sit down there and work with your code. So I think the expectations from organizations also, or you can challenge your headhunters that reach out to you, because this is really headhunters who are coming. Yeah. So helping them to understand what is the kind of profile that you should be looking for.
Yeah, but and then I think it goes one step back as well. What is it that you need? What is the gap that you're filling? And what is the gap that is what is logical for the CIO to do? And then now it's actually not maybe logical for the CIO to do this. I'm not so sure this is clear or understood, or at least there's many opinions on this as is consultants or experts.
Yeah, and I think that this role needs to be working very closely with a CIO function.
Yeah,
because it's understanding then.
But why is it a different function? What
the
is
CDO?
Yeah,
because the IT. I mean, if you think traditional IT, I don't think they're interested in data and data quality. They're not; those things are not on their agenda. It's platforms, it's IT, making sure it's working. And that's where you can have a lot of synergies if the CDO and the CIO or CTO work together. Because the CDO can put the requirements to a CIO function to get your platforms or whatever, work together with them. But the CDO is really more data-driven, making sure that the whole governance is in place. And then the insights are then collecting the requirements from the businesses so that you can, be the enabler, like you talked about earlier, right? The enabler to the rest of the organization.
But okay, so let's dissect this a little bit, because let's say you have had a CIO for a long time, and within the CIO space, you've had your ERP systems, you had your office IT, so you have your transactional systems, and then maybe you've had in the past some reporting and some data warehousing, and all of a sudden now, in order to at all succeed with AI, even in the smallest form, you need to start moving into the modern data stack. And now, how do you understand who owns? Let's then personify that with sort of maybe the cloud vendors or whatever that is, and some, typical vendors we see at Data Innovation Summit. What that feels tools and technologies for the modern data stack. Is the toolbox or the architecture of the toolbox part of the CIO role, or is it that a distinction between sort of ERP toolbox and the CDO on the other side? So how will the CIO and CDO work if I now move completely into OLAP, online analytical processing, the data processing? Can we work on the data governance and data management side without actually flipping it into hardcore engineering practices, which in that case needs to be flipped into the technology choices you have made as an engineering team? Yeah.
Is there really a clear-cut answer to that?
No, that's what I think it's a super...
I don't think so. Because I think it actually, it's every organization and understanding how they are set up. Yep. And then also, because over here, for me, I put a lot of people values first. And I think if you have a fantastic relationship with the CIO or CTO, work together and see what is the model that fits best for that organization. But I think that if the CIO is somebody that has been running it for so long, the CDO is brand new, and because that's really what it looks like today, right? Yes. Companies, yes. Yep. It's a brand new role, you're setting it up. There's so much to do for the brand new CDO. So don't take on a mountain, fix first what needs to be done as the enabler. What's your quick win? I don't think your quick win is going and pulling the ERP system or something from the CTO. So give him also that respect, give him or her that respect and say, keep this, let's sort out what are the quick wins? What do I really need to do first to get the buy-in from the people? Because again, the CDO is often shot down, right? So you have to create a fantastic, my first 100 days, what exactly am I doing? Do not put in taking away, from the CTO or CIO.
I think this is brilliant advice, because we know, if I take the traditional enterprise, that you have a legacy organization and legacy mandates and legacy setups that are there. And now we are understanding to a shallow level, I would argue, that we need a CDO. Yeah. So the first thing you need to do as a CDO for your first 100 days, so to speak, build your arena in co-creation and collaboration with the critical stakeholders. So basically, be very, very smart here of, taking on the stuff that sort of hasn't landed yet, and the stuff that has landed. Great, we collaborate on this.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yes, because, and you'll have plenty of time if you feel like later on, okay, and it's also the relationship you build with this person. So if you think that, okay, what should I take now? Are you happy still working with all this? I'm happy as well. Because the CDO, there's so much you can do.
But the key advice here is actually the profound, simple advice that you cannot clear out the mandate of the CDO on your own or in isolation.
No.
You need to understand how your mandate looks like in relation to technology, in relation to infrastructure, in relation to old technology, new technology, and then come up with a joint view on this.
Yes.
And where basically it makes sense because, finally someone is taking on these topics.
Exactly.
So that is the simple advice. And that will, of course, look different depending on the maturity and the journey of any company. So if you put in a CDO where they haven't started with a modern data stack, you only have old ERP systems, you have only old on-prem data warehouses, then maybe you need to take on more on the tech side, so to speak.
Yes.
But if you come to a place like, I can say both Vattenfall and Scania or whatever company that has been on the big data journey since 2012, 13, 14, then the story is different, how you frame out the chief digital officer or chief data officer role. Yeah. I like that advice. Very good.
Thank you. I'm happy to give.
Yeah. But that's, so this is, if I'm taking a step back now, our conversation today, we were in the midst of a conversation on ESG reporting, enterprise and social governance. And from there, we kind of very fast slipped into the rabbit hole of the chief data officer.
Yes.
And the interesting segue now is, connecting this circle back a little bit, is that if you look, let me try to frame it. If you look at ESG reporting, it basically states by compliance laws and new laws coming out of EU that you need to collect data and report on data which falls under the headings of environmental and social and governance topics. And there are several different frameworks. And this is coming into effect, I would say, already in 2024, because in reality, we should report in 2025 on these topics in most of the frameworks. But in order to report in 2025, you need to have collected the data in 2024. So you can't really wait with this problem until 2025, because then you don't have any data for January. So from January 2024, data needs to start be collected, and ultimately we have a year to form what I see as a new function, almost of the same caliber as a finance function doing the financial reporting. And to me, you start off trying to understand what ESG is and what the framework says and what are the KPIs and what are the metrics and how do you calculate that. And that's what's been sort of going on for the last year. And especially the management consultants have been very good at advising and knowing these frameworks really well. But I think right now, or maybe this spring, it fully hits home that in the end, the data collection and the data processing part will be a massive part of this governance, or actually this cost. So when you go to ESG reporting and you're now starting to collect a lot of operational data, mixing it with finance data, mixing it with social data or calculations you're supposed to do, it's a fairly complicated data management topic. And this is now the segue. I think the CDO function is one of the main players in any, or head of data, head of analytics is a super big, important player in order to cost effectively solve ESG. So that is the frame. So now we're sort of connecting back that how can the CDO be part of this game? How do you see this framing I did now?
Absolutely. And I think that this is so important, right? Because you will have legal teams. And I think that is also, you will have legal involved with you somehow, helping you on this journey. And I think the CDO function, because now you're collecting data, as we talked about in the earlier, you have data from all the different domains or the areas. So you have complete insight into helping your legal teams and your compliance teams to put these reports together to send in.
Yeah, and let's really dig into that domain topic, because I think this hardcore problem has not really dropped all the way to what it means. Because when you take ESG reporting, I mean, like if you are in one of those heavy abate type industries, so we have mining, we have transport, we have a couple of manufacturing where they are in the focus of this law. They need to collect data from to try to calculate CO2 as an example, or in the mine, in the logistics, in the offices, etc., etc., etc. So all of a sudden now we have very, very operational data that belongs in one particular function or domain in a company that needs to be now fed in and understood into a larger context. So it becomes virtually impossible for an ESG team on the top that knows so you have a team that really knows the ESG KPIs and metrics. So they know what they should send in.
Yeah.
But in order to sort out which data they need to join and put together, you need super duper deep domain knowledge from many, many different domain functions.
Absolutely.
And this is different to financial reporting, because the financial reporting, you stay a lot more within the financial model of a company. And here we need to mix data from vastly different data models.
So from the logistics team, you get. I mean, the guys driving the trucks outside. There was a company called In River that is also, I mean, there's a lot of companies that are also riding off on this, right? And I think In River has a good solution for this reporting. So,
but I want to stay with what you started there, because this is a multi-domain problem, multi-data model problem. So we have logistics, right? And within logistics, you will have your data model to understand the logistics business. Within the manufacturing plant, they will have a different data model that is relevant for operating the manufacturing plant. Within finance, you have the data model around your finance model of cost and all this, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now you need to model the data and understand exactly what data on the logistics side, together with the manufacturing side, together with the finance side, and you need to understand where to do the join, and you need to understand that. So if I put a new reporting team as an ESG reporting team on top here, there is no physical way that the ESG reporting team can know all these different data models.
Absolutely not.
So here now, within finance, you could kind of solve it within one operating function of finance, and they knew their taxes, and they knew their general ledger, they knew their common chart of accounts. But it's all within one fundamental data type. Here we are moving across many different data types that you need to have domain modeling first, understanding what data that needs to move to the sort of consuming domain of ESG. I think this is way more data governance, data management intensive than what we've done before.
Absolutely. And I think it'll take a lot more from an organization perspective to try and get these both. I can easily see a head of ECG with then, people kind of, when you talk about the hub and spoke, I mean, perhaps something like that from all the other different domains as well, because then they are the ones with the knowledge from their areas feeding into this ESG, head of ESG, to then reports, gives it or hands it, works together with the legal or with the CDO function to put this report together.
Yeah, and so let's work on that hypothesis. I think something like that will happen. Right now, we are scrambling on just to collect the data, and we build projects around that, and we are thinking more like projects just to get the stuff done.
Yeah.
But if I go into operations, and I'm going to do periodical reporting on this, I need to find a way to organize the people doing the right things in the data value chain, literally from the sensor to the report.
Yes.
So I think if I understand this not only as, I'm going to collect the data once, but I'm going to have an operating function that is doing this data processing where no one can understand the full model, that becomes a team topology of people who needs to work within the domain to do certain things. Maybe someone needs to work in some sort of a collection and validation interface, and someone needs to work in the reporting place. Yeah. So you really go out of Power BI and the reporting tool hardcore down into data collection, data storage, data processing, and you're ending up, if you're trying to do that as a monolithic warehouse, I think it's going to be very, very hard to have anyone to understand the full model. So this is driving more modern data architectures, like we talk data mesh, data fabric, or whatever we are talking about. It's not going to be easily solved in a monolithic data warehouse.
No. So I think we have a lot of work ahead of us.
We have a lot of work ahead of us.
Some exciting stuff as well.
Yeah, but think about this. Is ESG a reporting problem, or is ESG a data provisioning problem? So what I mean with that is, where will the cost incur to develop this and to operate this? If you set up this structure in the wrong way, you will have a lot of manual overhead simply to collect the data and do that on a daily basis.
That is a really good question.
So we're now looking at this as a reporting problem. And of course we do that because we need to understand the regulations. Yeah. But to solve it in the most cost-effective way, where will the cost or the money be spent to build it and operate it? I propose to you that from a cost perspective, where the money will flow in order to set this up and to operate this will be data processing. So basically it's a data provisioning problem at its core, more than, we need to know exactly what the domain needs and what they need. But when we figure that out, then we need to flip it to a CDO topic is my simple view on this.
I totally agree. I absolutely, really interesting.
But could you elaborate a little bit then on what do you think, how should the CDO act here, or how can he be part, is he even invited to the table yet?
Well, that's why you need a kick-ass like me. No, because you're saying something that is quite relevant. It's not always that the CDO is invited, and then you have to get more agitated and aggravated about it, because if you have a CDO in place, why are you not inviting the CDO to the table, right? Especially if you're discussing data issues. No, I think that also it starts to look like more a cost function. You're just using, you're just spending. So I think that with the ESG, with the rules coming in place, where we had GDPR, right? And that brought about also a more advanced or push for whole data governance. I think with the whole, this ESG reporting, I think the CDO has a very good, the CDO could actually position himself or herself in the right way of, being the enabler, getting this information, creating this to add value to the organization. Because it's something like you said, it's not going to go away. You're going to have to report. I do not think that every function itself is going to be, or the ESG as a standalone. The ESG could also report into the finance area, right? Because in some organizations, that's what you have. But since it is so much data collection to understanding, are we compliant? I think that the CDO should be a very natural person to go to for this function, together with legal and compliance.
Yeah, and let's elaborate on another angle here that I think also puts the CDO, how he can use this. Because if you think carefully now, we have the compliance lever with ESG to start collecting and creating beautiful data sets, trusted data sets that are clearly trusted to be used by EU, that we then can free up, if we have done this in a good way, to be used for other use cases. So I think if we elaborate this and, the whole defensive versus offensive strategy that we talked about as the CDO. So imagine, help me here, imagine what's the offensive possibilities if the CDO is part of this game and not only cleaning it up for the use of ESG, but it's actually cleaning it up in such a way, productizing it in such a way, so you can then use it for your AI algorithms as an example.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win, right? But what is the storytelling then? How would you advise the CDO to sort of pitch this sort of thing? So basically making a lemon into lemonade, so to speak.
I think there is I'm sorry, I don't think there's any sugarcoating it. ESG is going to be, it's coming your way. Yeah. So, get in the game. But I think that the is exactly as you say. I mean, this is something you have to do. Position yourself in the right way so that you're getting the mandate to run this from a data perspective.
Yes.
Because, I mean, I can imagine that it depends on every company and how the setup is. But the companies that I've worked with, the compliance function reported to the CFO. But and that would, I can imagine that some companies that would be a very nice way of reporting as well. But if it is a data function, get your foot in.
Yeah.
The CDO needs to get the foot in, work together with the compliance teams. And I think that is, the sugarcoating is that, your business case, if you do this, it affects this, this, and this, all the other things. So
imagine the pitch is simple. You have a compliance topic that you need to get on it, or yes. your license and operate.
You have a compliance need.
You have a compliance need. So how can I turn the lemon of a compliance need to an opportunity to yes. accelerate our data and AI data processing maturity and use these data sets for other use cases? That's the sugarcoating. That's yes. the lemonade that you with the
data that you can trust.
Data that you can trust that we send to EU is now available to consume for other use cases. That's how you sugarcoat it.
And then you'd also get your whole AI, the trustworthiness as well, the transparency. Yes. So it has to be a win. And I think that is one way of actually embracing it. Because instead of pushing it off and saying, you see this awful workload coming your way, if you turn it around to say that, wow, here's the opportunity, because we can then attack the transparency, the biases, the quality. There are so many things you can get with the same stone.
So what we're saying, invest in this topic in a way so it can be used for many other. So you basically addressing some of the core issues that you've been struggling with as an enterprise working on a data platform.
Yes.
That's a very that's a simple value proposition in the end, I think, if you can tell the story in the right way.
Yes.
All right. That's I think now we did the whole full circle from ESG to CDO back to ESG back to pitching as a CDO. I love that. I want to cover at least one more topic before we close for today. And I want to cover the topic, the entry point into this topic to me is how do we build, completely new topic, how do we build inclusion and diversity into our tech industry and into our tech part of our companies, and both why this is so important and then, how we can do it. And then actually that's the segue into talk also about girls in tech.
Yes.
So this kind of topic, I would like to start broad and then lead that into girls in tech. So why is this important with inclusion and diversity and ultimately more women in tech roles?
Yeah. So I recently met a CEO of a building construction company, and real estate, that's the word I was looking for, real estate. And she told me there's a lot of women in the real estate, Vanessa. And she questioned, does it have to be, equal? And I actually had to think about it. Does it have to be? Maybe you got more women in there, and overall in the grand scheme of things, it all adds up and it makes sense. But I think that having diversity in in tech or diversity in the real estate, the way we work is so different. The way we think is so different. It's quite amazing, really, because, I come with a different set of ways of thinking and skills compared to you, Henrik. I mean, you have a different way of thinking about it, and I come with a different angle to it. And I think just here in this little chat, it's so wonderful, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So imagine the benefits organizations would be making if you actually encouraged half and half, or a bigger, more women at the table. Because you have a different way of thinking of it. Because otherwise, if we were all women in here, we all thought about it this way, how boring would that be?
Yeah, but I think I think that you're spot on. I mean, because you can think about this. If you're a very homogeneous team, the imagination of how you can solve a problem stays within the frame of one type of idea and one direction, because we're all groomed in the same way.
Yes.
And if you have diversity, you will have other ideas, or someone will come up with a completely different understanding of the problem and therefore a different understanding of the solution. So step one, how can you have good innovation and not be stale if you in the end only have groupthink?
Exactly.
So this is number one. Let me test another angle on why this is so important. It scares me a little bit that with the tech giants and the tech industry and how we build code and how we build a large, what is really pervasive and it's changing the course of the world. We've seen it with social media. We think it's going to happen with AI and generative AI. It's quite scary to think that it's a very, very homogeneous, small group of profile of people who sort of imagines something that will impact everyone. So if I think about it like the caricature, the tech startup guy from Silicon Valley, it's the guy, he's in a certain age and he works in a certain way and they have a certain lingo in Silicon Valley. To me, that is not diversity. So thinking about that on a grander scale, everything we can do in order to have the people building the future be represented by the people living in society, that should be a good thing.
I agree. Yeah. I basically think, yes, there's a lot of explanations. There's a lot of research that has gone into why there should be diversity. Yeah. For me, it's plain and simple. I don't want to be the only woman at the table. So I'm putting my foot down and making sure there are more women also with me at the table.
That's very basic.
Very basic. I mean, because you get so much material of research being done of why this is good, and you've got good examples. Yes, there is, but I think it's up to each and every one of us what's the change we want to make, and that's why I decided 6 years ago I'm going to make a change, and I started Girls in Tech. And Girls in Tech was just started in Stockholm. What is Girls in Tech? I was at a Women in Tech event here in Stockholm. It's a sellout in a few minutes, yes. And I was there. I had a ticket and I went there and I saw women, really excited, pumped up women in this entire auditorium. And I looked around and I don't know, I felt like, what is this? We have missed the mark. Because if you're looking for women in tech, am I inspiring more women that are already clearly, they want to be here? They are women in tech. How will I get a proper flow of these women, constant women? I thought, I don't need to inspire you. You already got this. I need to go to the school. Exactly. I need to tell my kids, hey, go take tech because, so I did it for the sustainable flow of women someday, because otherwise, if we only focus on the women at the women in tech events, which are needed. So I'm not saying that don't crush me, because I'm not saying that they're not needed. They are needed, but I think it's looking at the younger generation, inspiring them, motivating them to take tech.
Yeah, but to me this is so good, and it's actually addressing two different problems. The one is addressing that we're getting more women in tech into more senior leadership roles, and that that our voices are heard here and now. But that doesn't fix the underlying problem. How do we get the fundamental flow that is more balanced? And we can have as many people asking us, why don't we have more women on AI After Work? Why don't we have more women speakers at Data Innovation Summit? And the hardcore reality is that when you look at who is educated and who got the job, the percentage of women, that's the one we need to change. Yeah. And that's what I think you are doing with Girls in Tech. Yes. So how does it work?
We go to schools and we inspire schoolgirls in classes 7, 8, 9. And then we hold events. So we get companies to work together with us, showcase their innovation, and have the girls come to these events. They get to touch, they get to feel, they get to ask questions. Today we also have mentoring, so they can sign up and we have mentors that get previously checked by us to make sure that they have the right skills also to be mentoring. We're looking at PROW. We're helping with PROW places because we know that some of the girls, they're challenged.
Yeah. PROW is when you go in school in some sort of, what would be English?
It's classes 8. When you're in class 8, you have to get work-life experience. It's
for a couple of weeks, yeah.
Yes. And then, the kids, if they don't get places, then they just go to go and sit in your dad's job or your mom's job. So we want to help them also in that. So all this time, for the last 6 years, the mission has been just to motivate and inspire. A couple of weeks ago, we were interviewed, my co-founder and myself, Ulrika Andersson. We were interviewed by DN. Because that was perfect, because we then looked at, so what is the bigger mission? And the bigger mission for us is to make the Nordics the place leading with diversity.
But and how can anyone listening to this help out? Because if you want to do this right, there is a massive effort here.
Yes. And
this is a non-profit, I have understood.
Yes.
Yeah, but even if it's a non-profit, you need to commercially be sustainable in order to ramp this up. Yes. I would argue that you have just scratched the surface of, you could do it so much more, do more events, do more regional events of the same thing, or do even other things. And this, how have you succeeded or to sort of fund this, or sort of what are you looking for if someone wants to help out?
So all this time it has been through charity, people mean well and just do it as from the goodness of their hearts. But you're absolutely right. We have noticed now after 6 years that if we want to get to the bigger mission, it's not enough what we're doing. So we're starting a fundraising event. It will be launched in October. So reach out to me, reach out to Ulrika. Because we have a Girls in Tech webpage, Girls in Tech Nordics webpage. So you can always get to the webpage and just reach out to us. Funding is fantastic and well needed.
You should have sponsors. You should have proper partners. The tech vendors, the sponsors, they have in my opinion, an obligation to support you if they stand behind diversity, not just with words but with action. Then we need to have sponsors that leads to this.
Agree.
That's how and you have sponsors, of course.
Of course. We have sponsors in kind.
Yeah.
Yes.
But this can be scaled up, of course.
Yes, and that's what we're looking for.
Yeah. Well, time flies.
Indeed.
And I just want to finish off on a little bit more personal note. You know, what's next in your life? What are you looking to do next? Because where are you right now in your life?
Yeah.
And you know, short term, you're going to go to an event or a mingle maybe today, but
Yes.
but you know, the next, what are you looking for? What do you want?
So I started my own advisory within the data space, of course, what is closest to my heart. But of course, I've not really done the whole consulting bit before. So anyone who is listening to this and wants help,
Perfect.
is welcome. But at the same time, I'm open for newer challenges. So if there's a company also looking for a CDO, an old timer like me,
And by the way, we already had a couple of things to talk about that we figured out right before the pod started. So exciting times.
Exciting times indeed. Thank you, Henrik.
Thank you very much.